It was Christmas dinner. The snow was falling gently outside, the kind of snow that makes everything look peaceful, like a Hallmark movie or something. The kind of snow that should make you feel warm and cozy inside, with the smell of roast turkey and pumpkin pie filling the air. Instead, as I sat there at the family dinner table, the warmth in the room felt suffocating. I'm Jason, 29, and for the past few years, I've been the black sheep of the family. Sure, that wasn't exactly unusual. Siblings often find their roles, right? But lately, it had gotten worse. I don't know when it all started to change, but over the last few months, it felt like everything I did just pissed off my family. No matter how hard I tried to make things work, it seemed like my family was finding new ways to make me feel like I was unwanted, like I didn't belong. It's not like I was perfect or anything, but damn, I didn't expect to be treated like this. It was my brother, Kyle, who started it all. He's the golden child, always the one who did everything right, never messed up, always had a smile on his face, and for some reason, my parents ate it all up. He could do no wrong. Kyle was the kind of guy who could walk into a room and everyone would turn to him like he was the Messiah, and I just wasn't. Over the years, I've tried to keep things civil with him, but the distance between us grew. He would make snide comments, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so much. Every time, it stung. This Christmas dinner was supposed to be different. I told myself that I wouldn't let anything get to me. It's Christmas, right? But as soon as I walked in, I could tell things weren't going to be normal. Mom was there in the kitchen, cooking like she always does, but she didn't even look up when I said hi. Dad was in his usual chair, reading the paper, giving me that polite nod, but nothing more. It was like they were all pretending that I wasn't really part of the family. And Kyle? Oh, he had that smirk. The one that always made me angry. It was after dinner, when we were all sitting around the table with dessert, that it happened. It started with some casual banter, nothing too serious, just the usual holiday chatter. I figured I could relax for once. But then Kyle leaned back in his chair, and with that damn smug grin of his, he looked at me. "Hey, Jason," he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "We had a vote." I raised an eyebrow. "A vote? What are you talking about? You weren't here last week, so we had a family vote well, about you," he said, and I immediately felt a knot twist in my stomach. "What vote?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Kyle looked around the table like he was the leader of the pack, like everyone was hanging on his every word. "We voted, and you're no longer part of the family," he said, his voice a mix of amusement and cruelty. Everyone around the table laughed. My parents chuckled along with it, even though their eyes avoided mine. It felt like a sick joke, but it was real. It was happening right in front of me. My heart sank. For a moment, I couldn't process what was going on. It was like the room had shrunk down, and all the voices blurred together. The laughter was the worst part. It felt like they were all in on it, and I was the only one who didn't get the punchline. I wanted to shout, to yell at them to stop, but something inside me froze. Instead, I just nodded. I nodded because, what else was there to do? "Well, that's nice," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The tension in the room grew. Kyle's grin didn't fade. "You should have been here for the vote," Kyle continued. "It was unanimous, you know? Everyone agreed. You're just not one of us anymore." He looked over at Mom and Dad for approval, and they both gave him a nod, like they were proud of him. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just stood up from the table. "Jason," my mom said, her voice a little shaky, like she wasn't quite sure if this was a joke or not. I didn't answer. I just walked away from the table, past the faces of people I had once called family. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my coat and pulled it on. I heard Kyle call after me, but I didn't stop. I didn't care anymore. As I reached the door, I heard my dad's voice. "Jason," he said, his tone low, "you're not really going to leave, are you?" I paused for a moment, my fingers gripping the doorknob. I looked over my shoulder. "You voted, didn't you?" I said, my voice steady now, despite the storm that raged inside me. "Well, I'm just honoring the vote." I opened the door and stepped outside into the cold, the winter air cutting through me like a knife. The door slammed shut behind me, and for a second, I stood there in the snow, not sure what to do. My breath was visible in the cold, and everything felt so surreal. How had it come to this? How had they all turned against me like this? I walked away from the house, from the laughter, from the pain. I didn't look back. But then something hit me. I'd been kicked out, sure, but I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to just let them treat me like I didn't matter, like I was some disposable thing that could just be voted out. No, I wasn't going to take that. I would make them realize what they had done. I spent the next few days in a haze, walking through the motions of life without really feeling it. My phone buzzed with messages, mostly from my parents, and a few from friends who somehow found out about the whole situation, but I ignored them. They could try to apologize or explain, but nothing would change. I didn't want to deal with any of it right away, but the anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't just the insult of being kicked out of the family that hurt. It was the years of being ignored, belittled, and disregarded. Years of being the one who was left out of family decisions, who was treated like a problem rather than a person. But now? Now, they crossed a line. I spent a few days with my close friend, Tyler, who had always been there for me. He let me vent, but he also gave me a reality check. Look, man, you can't just let them get away with this, he said one evening while we were sitting on his couch, the TV muted. But you have to do it the right way. You can't just walk in and start yelling, or you'll be giving them exactly what they want. It stung to hear the truth, but I knew Tyler was right. If I just lashed out at them, it would give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. They already saw me as the problem, the angry one. If I wanted to show them how serious I was, I had to play it smart. Over the next few weeks, I started formulating a plan. I wasn't going to burn bridges, at least not yet, but I would make them realize how much I've been undervalued. The first thing I did was stop reaching out. No more calls, no more messages. I didn't even bother to answer when they called. I wanted them to feel the absence. I wanted them to experience what it felt like to be ignored, to be treated like I was nothing. The next step was to take control of what I had left. I started putting together a small but effective network of people who actually cared about me. Tyler was on the front lines, of course, but there were a few other close friends, and even some distant relatives who'd always been more supportive. I gathered them all together for a few dinners, game nights, and outings, things that were a stark contrast to the cold, isolated feeling I had grown accustomed to at my family's gatherings. I posted about it, too. Nothing flashy, just casual photos of me laughing with friends, enjoying life without the constant tension of my family's judgment. It wasn't a statement, at least not to anyone who didn't know the context, but to my family? To them, it was a message. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. My parents invited me to a family meeting. The text came on a random Wednesday afternoon, and my heart skipped when I read it. I didn't even think twice before responding with a simple, "I'm not interested." They tried again, this time calling me, but I just let it ring out. By then, I had a plan in mind. A few days later, Kyle reached out to me. I wasn't sure how he'd gotten my new number, but there it was, his name flashing on my screen. I didn't answer, but after a few missed calls, he sent a message. "We need to talk. You're being childish." I couldn't help but laugh. If only he knew what I was actually up to. But instead of responding directly, I texted back, "I'm busy." For the first time in years, I felt in control. I wasn't just reacting to their treatment of me, I was making them react to me. The real kicker came a week later when Kyle, in all his smug glory, posted a picture of the whole family at a dinner. There they were, all sitting together, laughing like nothing had changed. They were all posing for the camera, wearing smiles that didn't reach their eyes. It was the kind of photo you see on social media, where everything looks perfect, but you can tell something is off. I stared at the picture for a while, a strange sense of calm washing over me. They'd already made their move. Now it was my turn. The next day, I set up a meeting with a local lawyer, someone I knew through a friend. I didn't need to make a legal case just yet, but I was preparing myself for the long game. It was clear to me now that I wasn't just going to sit back and let them forget about me. I needed leverage. I needed to make sure they knew they couldn't just erase me from the family. 2 weeks later, the Christmas incident was still fresh, but I wasn't done. I arranged a family dinner, one I'd host myself. It took a bit of planning, and I'd kept it low-key, but I invited everyone: mom, dad, Kyle, and even some extended family. At first, it felt weird to be the one reaching out, but I was playing a bigger game now. It wasn't about patching things up. No, it was about getting the last word. The night arrived, and when everyone gathered around the table, I could see the surprise in their eyes. Kyle was the first to speak up. "This is unexpected," he said, eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" I smiled, keeping my tone neutral. "Just thought we could have a decent meal together." The tension was palpable as we sat down, but I could feel the weight of the situation on my shoulders. I wasn't sure what they expected, but I wasn't backing down. I was finally the one in control. But then, After we had started eating, and the awkward silence filled the room, something unexpected happened. Kyle stood up and raised his glass. To family, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. I knew this was the moment to strike. It was time for them to see the true cost of what they had done. I think you've had enough, I said calmly, raising my own glass. Kyle looked confused, and so did my parents. What are you talking about? He asked. You wanted to vote me out, I said, slowly, carefully. Well, I'm making my own decisions now. I stood up, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the power shift in my favor. Kyle's smirk faltered as I looked directly at him. The vote was clear, right? I'm no longer part of the family, I said, my voice cold. The silence that followed was deafening, but I wasn't finished yet. I had one last thing to say, one final move. And that's when the doorbell rang. The doorbell echoed through the silence of the room, sharp and sudden. Everyone froze for a moment, eyes darting between each other as if trying to figure out what was going on. I hadn't planned for anyone else to show up. My gaze shifted to Kyle, whose smirk had evaporated entirely. His face, once filled with confidence, was now one of utter confusion and uncertainty. I walked over to the door slowly, enjoying the sense of control I hadn't felt in so long. As I opened it, the face that greeted me wasn't a relative or friend, but someone I hadn't expected. It was my lawyer. For a split second, there was a collective gasp. My parents' faces shifted from confusion to anger, but they didn't say anything. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to figure out what was happening. Kyle, ever the first to speak, finally managed to get a word out. Who is this? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stepped aside to let the lawyer into the room, giving him a subtle nod. He stepped in, holding a briefcase, his expression calm and professional. He didn't waste time with pleasantries, just walking straight to the table and looking at my parents. Good evening, he said, his voice clear and authoritative. I'm here on behalf of Jason. I believe you may remember him. My father's face reddened, but it was Kyle who spoke up first, trying to mask his discomfort with sarcasm. I don't know what this is about, but if you think we're just going to. Actually, the lawyer interrupted, cutting him off smoothly. I'm here to serve you all with this. He handed my mother a thick envelope. She hesitated, staring at it as if it might bite her, before reluctantly accepting it. My father sat up straighter in his chair, tension radiating from every fiber of his being. He must have known what was coming. It was the look of someone who realized they were about to lose control. What's going on? My mom finally asked, her voice trembling. I'm simply here to ensure that everyone is on the same page, the lawyer said calmly. This is a legal notice. As of today, Jason has filed formal documentation to terminate his connection with your family's estate and any future claims or entitlements associated with it. The room went quiet. The atmosphere shifted like a thunderstorm had rolled in, the weight of everything that had happened sinking in. I could feel the tension building, an almost suffocating pressure in the air. They were all staring at me, the shock evident on their faces. You're kidding, Kyle said, voice strained as he tried to hide the panic creeping into his tone. You can't do this. Actually, I can, the lawyer said smoothly, his eyes never leaving my family. This is just the beginning. You see, there are some other documents in this envelope that pertain to other family matters. But the main point is clear. Jason has made his decision, and I'm here to ensure that everyone involved understands the legal ramifications. My mother was the first to open the envelope, her hands shaking. She skimmed over the paperwork, her face paling with every line she read. The others were trying to hide their growing panic, but it was obvious they were starting to realize just how serious I was. You can't just cut us out of your life like this, my father said, his voice growing softer, more pleading. He finally stood up from the table and took a step toward me, but I held my ground. The years of neglect and control had built up, and I wasn't about to back down. I'm not cutting you out, Dad, I said slowly, my voice steady. I'm just making sure you know that I won't be treated like nothing anymore. I won't let you and Kyle manipulate me or treat me like I'm disposable. The vote you had, it doesn't count. I've made my decision. I'm out, and I'm making sure you can't do anything about it. Kyle clenched his fists. You're being dramatic. This is ridiculous. But even as he spoke, I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't used to being the one on the other side of the table, to seeing the power shift away from him. No, I said, my voice firm, this is reality. You wanted to vote me out, remember? You thought I'd just roll over and take it. But no, I'm taking control now. I'm done being the punchline in your jokes, the scapegoat for everything that goes wrong. I've got a life to live, and it's not with you. The lawyer turned to leave, his business completed. But before he could exit, my mother finally spoke up, her voice shaky but louder now. What do you want from us? Why now? Why did this to us? Why? I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. Because for years, you treated me like I didn't matter. You thought I would always be here to pick up the pieces when things went wrong. But that's not how this works. You want me to be part of your family? You want to pretend like nothing happened? Fine. But there's a cost. You don't get to toss me aside and then expect me to come crawling back. I paused, letting my words sink in. Kyle, now visibly uncomfortable, shifted in his seat, clearly losing his nerve. I've moved on, I added quietly. And I'm not going to beg for a place at your table anymore. The room fell silent. The tension was almost unbearable. My parents were staring at me as if they couldn't recognize their own child. Kyle's face was a mixture of disbelief and frustration, his eyes darting around as if looking for a way out. I stood there, my body tense, but my heart strangely calm. I wasn't the person they had tried to force into submission anymore. I had done it. I had made the decision. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself. I turned to the lawyer, nodding toward the door. Thanks for coming, I said. He gave a short nod in return and exited, leaving the weight of the moment behind him. And with that, the silence became overwhelming. My parents looked defeated, Kyle was seething, and the rest of the family, who had been quietly observing from the edges of the room, shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. I took a deep breath. This wasn't the end, but it was a turning point. The ball was in their court now. The question was whether they would finally realize the consequences of their actions or continue down the same path. As I stood there, looking at them, I knew that I had taken the first real step toward my freedom. But the story wasn't over yet. The real question was what would happen next. Would they accept it? Or would they try to pull me back into their toxic web? I couldn't wait to find out. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. My parents stared at the documents as if they could somehow will them out of existence. Kyle's face was twisted with disbelief, like he was trying to figure out how the power had slipped from his hands. The rest of the family, those who had gone along with the joke, who had laughed as they voted me out, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly unsure where they stood. Then, my mother did what she always did when she felt cornered. She tried to manipulate me. Honey, she said softly, folding her hands together as if she was the victim here. Let's not be hasty. We're family. You can't just walk away from us over a joke. I let out a breath of laughter. A joke? I repeated, shaking my head. That's funny, Mom, because it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like the moment you all finally said out loud what you'd been thinking for years, that I don't belong here. That's not true, she insisted, but there was no conviction in her voice. You don't get to decide that anymore, I said, cutting through her weak protest. For years, I've let you all treat me like an outsider in my own family. I let Kyle walk all over me. I let Dad ignore me unless he needed something. And I let you guilt trip me into staying, even when I knew I deserved better. But that ends today. Kyle scoffed, rolling his eyes. So what? You're just going to cut off your family forever? Over this? His voice dripped with condescension, but I could see the cracks forming in his bravado. He wasn't in control anymore, and he hated it. I met his gaze head on. Yes, I said simply. That's exactly what I'm doing. My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. You think you can just erase us? Family is family. You'll come crawling back one day. He said it like a fact, like it was inevitable. But he didn't know me at all. I took a deep breath, letting their words bounce off me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the final confirmation that I was making the right choice. I won't, I said, my voice steady. You made sure of that. You all decided I wasn't part of this family before I ever made this decision. I'm just making it official. I turned toward the door, feeling lighter than I had in years. My lawyer had already left, but he had done his part. The paperwork was filed, and soon, I would be legally free from any financial or familial obligations to them. No inheritance ties, no legal claims. Nothing. Kyle, realizing that I was serious, stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. You're a coward, he spat. You think you're better than us? You'll fail on your own. You'll come crawling back, begging for help. I turned back, looking him dead in the eye. If cutting out toxicity makes me a coward, then fine, I said. But at least I'm free. Enjoy your little kingdom, Kyle. I hope it was worth losing a brother. With that, I walked out the door. I didn't look back. The weeks that followed were eerily quiet. At first, my parents tried to call, then text, then send emails, each message shifting between fake concern and outright anger. I ignored every single one. Kyle, predictably, tried a different tactic. He sent messages taunting me, trying to get a rise out of me. I didn't respond. Then the messages stopped altogether. A month later, I heard through a mutual friend that Kyle was struggling. Without me around to take the blame for everything, the cracks in the family dynamic were starting to show. My parents had started putting pressure on him instead, expecting him to pick up the slack now that I was gone. It turned out that being the golden child wasn't so golden when there was no scapegoat left. As for me, I moved forward. I got an apartment in a new city, started focusing on my own life, and surrounded myself with people who actually cared about me. And for the first time in my life, I was truly happy. Because I wasn't just free from them. I was free. Hey Reddit, I guess I should start with an introduction. My name's Jake, I'm 18, and according to my parents, I'm a massive disappointment. Not because I did anything bad, no criminal record, no bad habits, nothing like that. No, my crime was deciding not to go to college right away. Instead, I wanted to focus on my freelance business, something I'd been building since high school. I'd been doing pretty well for myself, too. It wasn't making me rich yet, but I was earning enough to support myself. I had clients, steady work, and most importantly, I actually liked what I was doing. But my parents? They hated it. You'll never make it without a degree, my mom would say at least twice a week. You're just wasting time. You think this little side hustle is going to support you forever, my dad would add. They treated me like I was some reckless kid refusing to grow up. I told them I wasn't against college, I just didn't want to rush into it. If my business failed, I'd reconsider, but for now, I was taking a chance on myself. They did not approve. At the same time, my older brother, Matt, was having issues. He and his wife, Lisa, had been struggling to pay rent. He wasn't exactly the most responsible person, and Lisa had expensive tastes. They'd already borrowed money from my parents multiple times, and while my parents would complain about it, they always gave in. Then one day, I came home and found my mom in my room, sorting through my stuff. What are you doing? I asked. She didn't even look up. We need to talk. I had a bad feeling right away. She sat me down in the living room, where my dad and Matt were already waiting. Lisa wasn't there, probably too busy doing whatever it was she did. Mom cleared her throat. Jake, you know how hard things have been for your brother and Lisa. They need some stability right now. I just stared at her. Okay. My dad sighed like I was being difficult. We've decided that Matt and Lisa are going to move in. They need a place to stay, and it doesn't make sense for them to struggle when we have space. I blinked. You'll be fine, Jake, Mom said in her most patronizing voice. You're 18. You can find a place to stay. You're making your own money, aren't you? I was too shocked to even respond at first. They were kicking me out. Just like that. But this is my room, I finally said. I live here. You don't contribute, Jake, Matt cut in, arms crossed like he was the one being inconvenienced. You don't pay rent. I've been struggling, and I actually have a family to support. I almost laughed. Lisa doesn't work, and you keep spending money on dumb stuff. How's that my problem? Mom shot me a warning look. Jake, don't be selfish. You're not our priority anymore. Matt and Lisa need this more than you do. Then, as if to hammer the point home, she picked up one of my duffel bags and tossed it toward the door. Start packing, she said. I looked at my dad, hoping, just hoping, he'd at least try to reason with her. But nope. He just nodded like this was completely reasonable. I could have argued. I could have begged. But something in me just clicked. I stood up. Fine. I packed up my stuff, whatever I could carry, and walked out the door. I didn't cry. I didn't even say goodbye. If they wanted to treat me like an afterthought, I'd return the favor. I crashed at a friend's place for a bit and threw myself into my work. For 6 months, I didn't hear a word from them. Not a single call, not a text, not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post about how kids these days are so ungrateful. I guess, in their minds, I was out of sight, out of mind. Which was fine by me. In those 6 months, my life changed drastically. I went from scraping by to making more money than I ever thought possible at my age. The kind of money that made me laugh at the idea of ever needing to borrow from my parents or anyone again. At first, I was just freelancing. But then I got smart. I started outsourcing some of the work, built a brand, and before I knew it, I had a full-blown business. A successful one. One that didn't just pay my bills, it let me move into a beautiful apartment, buy my dream setup, and most importantly, never worry about money again. And that was around the time my parents suddenly remembered I existed. It started with a casual text from my mom. Mom, hey sweetie, how have you been? Sweetie? I actually had to double check to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. This was the same woman who, 6 months ago, had tossed my things out like I was a tenant who forgot to pay rent. I didn't reply. A few days later, another text. Mom texted, Jake, it's been a while. We miss you. Why don't you come over for dinner? Miss me? That was funny, because I sure didn't remember them missing me when I was hauling my stuff out in a duffel bag. Again, I didn't reply. Then, the call started. At first, I ignored them. But after the fifth one in a single day, I got curious and picked up. Hello, Jake. My mom's voice was way too cheerful. Oh, honey, it's so good to hear your voice. We were just talking about you. Uh-huh, I said flatly. And she hesitated. And, well, we wanted to see how you were doing. You know, catch up. Maybe you could come by the house sometime. I smirked. My old house, you mean? There was an awkward silence. Then my dad cleared his throat in the background. Look, Jake, we know things were tense before, but we're still family. And family takes care of each other. That line? Oh, that line was rich. Family takes care of each other? I repeated slowly. That's funny, because I don't remember much taking care when you threw me out to make room for Matt. My mom sighed like I was the unreasonable one. Jake, that's in the past. We thought it was best at the time, but we miss you. Right. And this sudden interest has nothing to do with the fact that I'm doing well now. Of course not, she said way too quickly. But, well, since you brought it up, we did hear that you've been doing well for yourself. You know, your aunt ran into one of your old teachers, and they mentioned how proud they were of you. Isn't that wonderful? Ah, there it was. They had no idea what I was actually doing, but they'd heard enough to know that I wasn't struggling. And now they were trying to ease their way back in. Still, I played dumb. Huh, that is interesting. Mom laughed nervously. Yes. So, why don't you come over for dinner? I'll make your favorite meal. We can all catch up. I pretended to think. I don't know, Mom. Is there even room for me? I mean, since Matt and Lisa are there and all. Silence. Then, in a much smaller voice. Well, about that. I raised an eyebrow. What about that? My dad sighed heavily. They moved out. I almost burst out laughing. Of course they did. And I prompted. Well, things have been a little difficult, Mom admitted. Your father and I have been helping them out financially, but money's been tight. Ah, there it is. And what does that have to do with me? Well, my mom hesitated again. We just thought, since you're doing so well, maybe you could help out a little. Bingo. I let out a low whistle. Wow. So let me get this straight. You kicked me out because I wasn't a priority anymore. But now that I have money, I'm a priority. That's not fair, Jake. My dad cut in. We're still your parents. Were you still my parents when you let Matt take my room? Were you still my parents when Mom threw my stuff outside? Were you still my parents when you didn't even bother to check on me for 6 months? More silence. Then my mom tried a different angle. Jake, we made mistakes, okay? But we love you. And right now, we really need your help. I sat back, grinning. Oh, this was way too good. I was about to have some fun. I let the silence stretch out, enjoying the discomfort on the other end of the line. Finally, I sighed, keeping my voice deliberately calm. You need my help? That's funny, because 6 months ago, you made it very clear that I wasn't your priority anymore. You told me that straight to my face. Remember that, Mom? Right before you started throwing my things outside. Jake, that was what, Mom? I cut her off. A mistake? A bad decision? No, it was a choice. You chose Matt over me. You chose to get rid of me. And now you think I owe you something? Let me make this crystal clear. I don't owe you anything. Jake, please. My mom's voice wavered, but I wasn't falling for it. Dad chimed in, his voice edged with frustration. Son, you're being selfish. We raised you. We gave you everything. And now that we need a little help, you turn your back on us. I laughed coldly. Oh, now you want to bring up raising me? That's interesting, because when I needed a place to stay, you didn't seem to care too much about that. And a little help? Don't make me laugh. You didn't check in for 6 months. The only reason you're talking to me now is because I have money. Be honest for once. Another heavy silence. Then my mom's voice broke through, more desperate now. Jake, please, we're struggling. Your father's hours got cut, and we've been helping Matt with his rent ever since he left. We're behind on bills, and that's not my problem. I finished for her. You made it clear I wasn't part of the family anymore. So now, you're not my problem anymore. Jake, don't be like this, Mom begged, but I was already shaking my head, even though they couldn't see me. You wanted me gone, and now you got what you wanted. Leave me alone. Good luck. And with that, I hung up. For the next few days, I ignored every call and text they sent. The guilt-tripping messages, the passive-aggressive ones, even the ones that tried to act like nothing had happened. I figured they'd give up eventually. I was wrong. One evening, as I was finishing up some work, there was a loud, persistent knocking at my door. I frowned, pushing back from my desk. I wasn't expecting anyone. My stomach twisted with a strange sense of foreboding as I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. And there they were, my parents, standing right outside my apartment. I froze. How did they even find me? I never told them my new address. But as I stared at them, my dad knocked again, harder this time. Jake, we know you're in there. Open up. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just stared through the peephole, my mind racing. How had they found me? I hadn't given them my address, hadn't posted anything that could lead them here. But there they were, my mother clutching her purse like it was the only thing holding her together, my father standing stiffly beside her, his jaw set in that way that meant he was barely keeping his temper in check. The knocking came again, harder this time. Jake, we're not leaving, my dad called through the door, his voice firm. You might as well open up. I considered ignoring them, just walking away and pretending I wasn't home. But I knew my parents. They were stubborn. They wouldn't just leave, not when they needed something from me. With a sigh, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. The second my mother saw me, her face crumpled. Oh, Jake, thank God, she breathed, stepping forward like she was about to hug me. I didn't move, and she hesitated, her arms falling back to her sides. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. How did you find me? Dad cleared his throat. Your brother. I should have known. I hadn't spoken to Matt since I left, but I guess he must have found out where I lived, probably through some mutual acquaintance or maybe even digging through my old stuff. The thought made my stomach turn. I let out a slow breath. What do you want? Mom glanced at Dad, then back at me. Jake, honey, we need help. Yeah, I got that much from the 50 missed calls, I said dryly. I told you already, I'm not interested. Jake, don't be like this, Dad said, his voice low and warning. We're family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Now we're family? That's funny. Because last time I checked, family doesn't kick their kid out and throw their stuff onto the lawn so their golden boy can have his room. I fixed my mom with a pointed look. Ring any bells? She had the nerve to look offended. That's not fair. We didn't kick you out, Jake. You absolutely kicked me out. I cut her off. Don't even try to twist it. You chose Matt over me. I was nothing but an inconvenience to you. Dad's face darkened. That's not true. Oh, really? I shot back. Then tell me, why didn't you offer me so much as a couch to sleep on? Why didn't you help me the way you're helping Matt? If he couldn't afford rent, why didn't he find another place instead of stealing mine? They didn't have an answer for that. Instead, Mom just sighed. Jake, we made mistakes, okay? But things have been really hard. Your father's barely getting any hours at work, and we've been covering Matt's rent since he moved in. We're behind on bills. The mortgage, the electricity, everything. We're drowning. I tilted my head. And that's my problem, how? She flinched, like she couldn't believe I'd actually said that. Jake, we're desperate. We don't have anyone else to turn to. And whose fault is that? I asked, raising an eyebrow. You burned every bridge with me. You made it clear that I wasn't a priority, that I wasn't even wanted. Dad took a step forward, and for a second, I thought he was going to try to intimidate me. It wouldn't work. Not anymore. Jake, you can't seriously be this heartless. I can be when it comes to people who threw me away the second I didn't fit their expectations. I met his gaze, unflinching. I was supposed to go to college, right? That was the plan? And when I didn't, when I decided to do things my way, you decided I was a lost cause. A disappointment. Jake, that's not. Save it. I cut my mom off again. You know what's really funny? If I had gone to college, I wouldn't have been able to help you anyway. I'd be drowning in student debt. But since I didn't, and I actually made something of myself, now you suddenly care about me again. Now I'm worth your time. Mom's eyes were glistening now, but I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. We're sorry, Jake, she whispered. I stared at her, letting the words hang in the air between us. Then I shook my head. No, you're not. You're just sorry you're broke. Her face twisted like I'd slapped her. Dad took a deep breath, clearly trying to rein in his temper. Jake, we're asking for help. Just a little bit. Just to get us back on our feet. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. You want my help? Yes, Mom said quickly. I smiled. Here's my advice, get a job. Maybe two. That's what I did. Their expressions fell instantly. Jake, I'm done with this conversation. I stepped back into my apartment. Leave me alone. And good luck. Then I shut the door in their faces. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, waiting to see if they'd knock again. But they didn't. After a few minutes, I heard their footsteps retreat down the hall. I exhaled slowly. It should have felt satisfying. I wanted it to. But a small, bitter part of me still ached, because no matter what they had done, they were still my parents. And they'd only ever see me as a wallet. I thought that would be the end of it, that I'd made myself clear. I was wrong, because 3 days later, they came back. This time, they weren't alone. This time, they brought Matt and his wife. I almost laughed when I saw them standing there, all four of them crammed together outside my apartment door. Mom looked hopeful, Dad looked annoyed, and Matt had that same smug, entitled expression he always wore when he thought things would go his way. And his wife, Amanda? She looked downright furious, like she was the one who had been wronged. I took my time opening the door, leaning against the frame with my arms crossed. Wow, a whole family reunion. What, did you think if you brought reinforcements, I'd suddenly feel guilty? Mom sighed. Jake, please. I held up a hand, cutting her off. No. Let's hear it. What's the angle this time? Because I already said no, and you didn't listen. Matt stepped forward like he was the leader of the group. Listen, man, we're not here to fight. We just need to talk. I raised an eyebrow. You? Talk? That's funny. Because the last time we talked, it was you telling me how I was the selfish one for being upset that you stole my room. He had the audacity to look offended. I didn't steal it, okay? Mom and Dad made a decision. Oh, I know, I said, smirking. They made it very clear that I wasn't a priority, that you were more important. And now, you're all standing here like stray dogs, begging me to throw you a bone. Amanda scoffed. Oh, don't be so dramatic. I turned my attention to her. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I being dramatic? Would you like me to remind you how you personally threw my stuff onto the lawn? How you looked me in the eye and told me to get over it? She had the nerve to roll her eyes. God, you're still on that? I grinned. I am. Dad cleared his throat, stepping in before Amanda could say something worse. Jake, let's be serious for a moment. We're in real trouble. Oh, I am serious, I said. I'm very serious. I'm seriously enjoying this. Mom let out a shaky breath, clasping her hands together like she was praying. Jake, we can't pay the mortgage. The house is going to be foreclosed on. Your father's work cut his hours even more. Matt and Amanda, she glanced at them like she was expecting them to chime in. But they just looked at the floor. They've been trying, but it's just too much. We can't afford this anymore. I pretended to think for a moment. That does sound bad. She nodded eagerly. It is bad. Real bad, Matt added. Super bad, I agreed, then shrugged. Anyway, best of luck. Mom's face fell. Jake, I cut her off, my tone sharp. No, I don't care. I don't owe you anything. Dad stepped forward, trying the intimidation tactic again. Jake, we raised you. Oh, don't even start with that, I snapped, my voice cold now. You raised me? You fed me and housed me because you were legally required to. That's called parenting, not a freaking investment you can cash in on later. Amanda scoffed. You're being a child. I whirled on her. You're the one standing outside my door, begging me for money because you and your husband couldn't figure out how to be financially responsible. I left with nothing and made something of myself. Meanwhile, you two played house at my expense, and now you're drowning. Matt clenched his jaw. Jake, come on. We're family. I laughed. Funny how you only pull the family card when you need something. Where was all this? Were family energy when you watched Mom throw my stuff outside? Where was it when you moved into my room without a second thought? He had nothing to say to that. Dad sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Jake, we get it. We messed up. But can't you just— No, my voice was sharp and final. You don't get to throw me away and then come crawling back when it's convenient. You don't get to treat me like trash and then expect me to save you. Mom looked like she was on the verge of tears. Jake, please. Just a little help. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice. How many times do I have to say it? I do. Not care. Amanda scoffed again, crossing her arms. You're unbelievable. You have so much money. And you're really just going to let your family suffer. I tilted my head. Yep. She opened her mouth, probably to call me selfish or cruel, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned on my heel, walked back into my apartment, and shut the door in their faces. For a few seconds, I just stood there, listening. I heard muffled voices, Mom still pleading, Matt muttering something, Dad letting out a long sigh. Then, finally, footsteps. They left. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. This time, I felt nothing. No guilt. No sadness. Just peace. They had made their choice. And now, so had I. And I would never, ever look back. But honestly, what a wild turn of events. One moment, I'm getting thrown out of my own home like yesterday's garbage, and the next, my entire family is on my doorstep, practically on their knees, acting like I owe them the world. It's almost funny. Almost. So, what do you guys think? Was I too harsh? Should I have given them a little help? Or did they deserve every second of that humiliation? Because after everything they put me through, I feel like I barely gave them what was coming.